Hello everybody, welcome to Dakman Productions and welcome to Kanahay Rail. I'm back in my Kanahay Rail studios for this video. And so today in this video, we're going to talk about my personal line-out woes and fixes with the line-out couplers. And so this is where I'm going to throw in my disclaimer before I move on any further. So the disclaimer is I am not bashing any company. I'm just merely pointing out the problems and issues that I've had with certain line-out couplers and the fixes that I found along the way with some of these fixes were with the help of others. So this video is pretty much a tech type video to help those who may be having the same issues that I did with the line-out couplers. So that's the disclaimer. But anyway, we're going to cover the problems with the line-out kinetic couplers, or kinetic couplers, however you want to say it. Problem and the fixes, and there's going to be a few problems that happen with the kinetic coupler. So we're going to cover the 86-foot boxcar and the line-out scale 89-foot auto-rack car. I do not have any passenger cars with kinetic couplers, so I can't help you out with that. But if you have at least the auto-rack or the 86-foot boxcar, this video will be very helpful. And then we move on to the thumbtack couplers, and then finally the milk car couplers. So maybe there's a fix for you. Maybe there's something that hopefully is useful in this video for you. So stay tuned, because there's a couple of safety things that are involved with this. A potential fire hazard, if you will. So make sure you watch this whole entire video to reduce any kind of fire hazard, which almost happened to me on Kanahay Rail. And we'll explain that further into the video. So we're going to cover my line-out coupler woes and fixes, potential safety fire hazard, and the fixes that I found along the way. Like I said, with the help of others on either the internet or websites or Facebook groups, whatever have you. So I wanted to put everything together in one video and then show you guys. Okay. First, before we begin though, I want to have some type of backstory. So let's back up to 2017. So in 2017, I was invited to the North Penn O-Gagers Run for Fun event. This is where you bring your own locomotive and they set you up with some freight cars to run. So here is my Kanahay Rail Conrail SD80 Mac locomotive running on the North Penn O-Gagers layout for the 2017 Run for Fun. They decided to set me up with these cool line-out 86-foot boxcars. I absolutely fell in love with these boxcars. And so in 2018, or for the rest of 2017, I decided to start buying and accumulating some of these cars so I could run my own train like this on Kanahay Rail for 2018. Using a SD70 Mac instead, which was part of the Big Blue set. Now for 2018, I bought the line-out Conrail Big Blue set, and I've accumulated enough 86-foot boxcars to make a run on Kanahay Rail. But before I invested in all this, I checked to make sure that these cars could run on 054, because at this point in time in 2018, Kanahay Rail was 054 at that time. And according to the line-out website, yes, they said they would run on 054. However, I ran into multiple derailing issues, and we'll cover as to why that kept happening over and over again. This video was not very successful. Matter of fact, I was so disappointed with the run. I packed everything up, literally considering selling everything and just moving on, but instead I decided to update the layout to 072 in 2019, so I spent a whole entire year of 2019 before I could run anything again. So at the beginning of 2019, I decided to update Kanahe Rail from 054 to 072 rather than selling everything off that I bought from Lionel that they said could run on 054, such as the scale 89-foot auto rack and the scale 86-foot Haiku boxcar. So I went ahead and reinvested into Kanahe Rail, and at this point in time, I am still single mainline, and later that same year, I actually updated to dual mainline, which I'm glad I did. This was a little bit more of a better run, a successful run, so I was a lot more happier with the outcome of this, but there were problems that I ran into along the way that people should be aware of, and the fixes that I found for them. So let's go ahead and move on to the problems that I had and what I did to fix them. So now you got the backstory on the my purchase. The reason why I purchased the Lionel 86-foot Haiku boxcar, and I also had the auto racks. Basically the same thing, but I'll tell you a couple different things between the both of them. The problems and the pluses and the minuses, but we'll get into that a little bit later here. But let's talk about the Lionel 86-foot boxcar in particular with the Cometic couplers. So as you see in the video, earlier in the video, I did a Run for Fun event. They set me up with the 86-foot boxcars. At that time, I think the Run for Fun or the North Penn Irrigators were 080 and up as far as curves. So there, I mean, the train ran flawless. I went on Lionel's website. At that point in time, in 2017, they had printed on their website that these cars could run and negotiate 054. So I went ahead and started buying these 86-foot boxcars. They were expensive for somebody like me. You know, we're talking, you know, at that time, $100 a shot, just about. Right around, give or take. You might get them on sale for right around $95, but most of them were $100 a piece. Plus the Conrail Big Blue set, which is the 86-foot Haiku boxcar train set. I bought that. So it took quite some time for me to build up a train big enough to run. So it took me the rest of 2017, because I think that video in 2017 was right around June, July, September. So it took me the rest of the year 2017 and the beginning of 2018 before I could run a train. That 2018 video you seen running, me running the 86-foot boxcar train was a total disaster. I made it look good because there was a lot of cuts, there was a lot of edits. I'm not even joking. I made it look good, but it was a disastrous run. I found out the hard way. This train will not negotiate 054, and we'll find out why here in a minute, and I'll show you that. So, lucky for me, I didn't get my updates done to Kanahe Rail. So I still have the inside track, that's 054. And so that's the track we'll be using to simulate the problems that I had. And we'll talk about why this was happening. So once again, this is 054 in here. This is what Lionel said these cars could run on. during that time period. I heard that they changed that. I'm not sure if they did or not. And upped it to 064 or 072. I don't know, but I just wanted to point that out. So imagine, if you will, you spent almost an entire 6 months to 8 months of saving money to buy a whole bunch of cars with following the recommendations of a manufacturer, only to be totally disappointed that once it gets into an 054 curve, that it will derail coming back out of it. So why was this happening? Why did I keep having derailments? Well, I found, and I'm going to take this camcorder off so you guys can see. I'm going to do a little bit of hand. So now, as you can see, we're into a curve. Now, pulling this by hand is one thing. So more likely it'll probably come back on its own, and it does. So what happens is that there's a lot of slack, and I'll show you. There's a lot of slack on the cars. If there's enough slack, what will happen is, if these cars are bouncing around like this, in the right section, what will happen is that there's a tang in the kinetic couplers that'll get fetched up. I'm trying to make it happen. There you go. So, now watch what happens, because that bouncing around will actually happen on a train that's long enough. So now we come along. Okay, it went ahead and released itself, but usually it wouldn't. So it must be worn enough that. And there was another thing that happened. I'm glad that happened on video. So you can see that the couplers between each car are off. That's another problem with these. See the couplers? See how bad off they are? And that's another thing I'm going to show you in this video, how to fix that. So first, let's talk about why these things would fetch up and derail. So first, we have to understand how the kinetic coupler works. If you look here, it works as a Y. And it gives you a general idea how the kinetic coupler actually. The problem is that this tang right here can come out and actually get fetched up. So as you can see, the tang is out and stuck. And what I would have to do is I would have to flip the car upside down, push on this, get it to go back in again. Now, at first, I thought this was an isolated incident, but it kept happening to other cars and always in a curve. And like I said, if Lionel had taken this tang right here, and I'll point to it with a screwdriver, and made this part of it right here maybe another 1/8 inch longer. My hands in the video. So if Lionel made this tang right here an 1/8 inch longer, so it came out from under here, it probably would have worked on 054, because as the car bounces, this will come out and get fetched up just like that. Then you gotta flip the car upside down like this, push down on it, and it goes back in. It did not make for a nice run at all. So, the fix for that, unfortunately, is not to run it on 054 track. That's the fix for that problem. Now, as you've seen, we had a coupler that was too low, which is this one right here. It needs to be adjusted. So what'll happen is, unfortunately, if the coupler's too low, the thumbtack will rub the middle rail. And what that does, it causes a resistive short. So let's talk about a resistive short for a little bit here. A resistive short will not trip a breaker. And I know everybody's thinking it's like that's impossible. No, it's not. Thinking about you making your toast in the morning in your toaster. A toaster is a perfect example of a resistive short. A toaster creates a short which heats the coils within inside of it without tripping the breaker, and it cooks your bread or toasts your bread. So basically that's what happens here. The thumbtack will start to rub the center rail because it's too low. And what'll happen is, and I'll see if I can get close to this. So you see the springs inside. There's a small spring in here. And guess what happens to that small spring that's inside here? It gets used as a toaster. So the short will conduct through the coupler and start heating the spring until eventually it melts and turns orange. And if you're running on the carpet, if you're running on Lionel Fast Track, which is plastic, that's not going to end up well. And I have actually had this happen that I'm talking about. This really did happen on Conahee Rail, to where this thumbtack coupler was rubbing. The short went into the spring, did not trip the breaker because it's a resistive short, and actually melted this spring out of the car. So I just wanted people to be aware that that this is a fire hazard. And it's just barely seated in there, but there is a spring in there. So the next question is, how do you prevent this, and how do you adjust the coupler? Well, to prevent it, I would suggest trying out each car individually on the track and making sure that there's plenty of clearance between your third rail and the thumbtack coupler. To adjust this is just a matter of taking these screws out here. So we're going to go ahead and do that because we're already here and it needs it anyway. So why not, right? Why not show everybody what's going on here. Now you should be using two different size screwdrivers. I'm just too lazy to go get the next size, bigger one. Alright, so now we got the 4 screws out. 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 2 different size screw heads, as I mentioned. And you're basically going to take this plate off. Here it is right here. We'll put that's your retainer plate. We'll put that off to the side for right now. And you'll notice that it's on a spring. So be very careful. And I probably should take it off the spring, but they're so painful to put back on. They truly are. Alright, so I went ahead and took it off the spring so I can show you guys. So this is your Lionel Kinetic coupler. And the problem is it relies on this thin plate for alignment. So just bouncing around in the box or anything like that. And it doesn't take much to bend this. So we're going to put a slight bend. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and I'm going to bend it down, which should take this coupler away from the thumbtack, away from the middle rail. And you have to do this. Unfortunately, you can't do this in the car, because if you try to do it in the car, you will break details off the car. You'll end up damaging the car. And it doesn't take much. That's probably a little bit too much. So what I did is I just went like this. When I bent it, I did my bend right here. So I take my hand here and here. If you're not as strong as I am, you can use a pair of pliers, but it doesn't take much. Just do a little bit at a time. And then we got to put this back in the car and then try it again. Alright, so we got the spring back on there because that's the most painful part. I can't do that and put the and hold the camera too. So the biggest thing is you gotta line up this pin. There's a pin that goes inside here. Just make sure that pin goes into that Y. You can see the Y a little bit better in these. Just make sure, there we go, that you're lined up completely flat. Now we can put our plate on, which will go on over the top of here. And if you're not good at putting the spring back on, you can always take this truck off. There's only one more screw that holds that truck on, and you can get the spring on a lot easier. Put the truck back on after you get it all back together. Alright, so there you go. So I took off this screw, this screw, this screw, and this screw. This plate comes off, then the kinetic coupler comes out. You can take the spring off. If you have a hard time putting the spring back on, there's one more screw here. You can take the truck off, put the spring back on, put all this together, put the truck on last. So the reason why you should not be adjusting this while it's in or on is because you can break off, you can end up breaking off this nice piece of detail right here by bending it, because it will hit. See that? So it hits this. And so that's how you level out your couplers. I recommend using a height gauge. What I've done is I bent each one to each car, and I numbered my cars 1 through 16. So now they have to go in a certain order, so all the couplers are in the right spot that I bent to match each other. But that was my quick way of fixing that. The right way to fixing that is buying like maybe a Kadee coupler height gauge or something to reference, and then making every car the correct and proper height so you can match them any way you want to. Alright, so we covered quite a few things here. So we covered why this derails in 054. We covered why this can be a possible fire hazard. We also covered on how to adjust your height of your knuckle coupler by taking it apart. So hopefully so far this helps people out. Non-coupler related, the Lionel 86-foot boxcar I found out actually suffers from body flexing. In other words, the body is constantly flexing like this. Or at least the chassis is. So I have found that the chassis on this car flexes, or the frame or chassis, whatever you want to call it. But the Lionel 89-foot Autorack does not suffer from this like the 86-foot boxcar does, and we'll talk about that real quickly. So why does the Lionel 86-foot boxcar flex so bad in this area here, where the wheels attaches to the frame, the chassis, whatever you want to call it? This part of it, as you can see here, this frame or chassis actually comes out of the body. And I've already had a couple of these apart because I had to add weight. That's another issue with these we'll talk about here in a minute. But what happens is I have found that this frame or the chassis itself flexes inside of the body. So that causes the car, the couplers to move quite a bit within each other because of the flexing. What happened is that when Lionel made these or designed these, they designed this frame to go inside of the boxcar. The problem with that is there's only 4 little 1/8 pedestals to hold this in place now. So that being said, there was a lot of flexing in this frame or chassis. From my inside sources, Lionel was actually considering, which I was going to do on my own, Lionel was actually considering making a stiffener plate out of aluminum that would go across this to stop that from happening. But as far as I know, they have not done that. So, if they would have done that, it would have done 2 different things. Not only would it have stiffened the frame because it's inside the body, but it would also have added the necessary weight that these need because these are way too light. So once I got up to 15, 16 cars, I was pulling the first 2 cars off the track on 072 curves, believe it or not, because they're so light. So actually, since the doors do not open on an 86-foot boxcar, I was stuck disassembling them to add weight, and this is when I made the discovery of the design flaw of how they're put together. And so, with that being said, why does the 89-foot scale size Lionel car not suffer from this? Good question. We'll take one out and we'll look at it. So here we have the Lionel 89-foot Autorack car out of the box. And now we're going to take a look at this. By far, this is a lot more, dependable to run because there's no flexing to this car. And here's why. When Lionel built this car and they built this frame, they actually put the frame on top of the body instead of inside the body, which is, realistic to, an Autorack. So now you had the whole body that this frame sits on instead of the 4 little 1/8 pedestals. So you can see where the frame splits right here, or right where my fingernail's at. And that's where the frame sits on top of the body. So now you have the support of the entire body of the car on the frame, so these will not flex at all. These are really dependable runners. As long as you're on 072 track and you don't have a big divot or dip in your track work, you can run these all day long with no problem. These also suffer from, since they are Cometic couplers, the same thing, that these could be bent where you have to take them apart and bend the couplers so they don't rub the third rail. So when you have couplers at different heights, then you got one that's not at the proper height, or it's rubbing the rail, you're going to have to take the 4 screws off, like I showed you on the boxcar, and bend it away from the third rail, because it has the same setup as the 86-foot boxcar. So, needless to say, I enjoyed running the Autoracks a lot more than the 86-foot boxcars and a train, because I had very little issues running these. Most of my issues are running the 86-foot boxcar. And if Lionel had, and like I said, I understand why they put the frame up inside the body, because that's prototypical, it's realistic, it's correct. However, if they had put that stiffener inside of the car, since the doors don't open anyway, you would never know that it's in there. It would have stiffened the car up properly and added the proper weight to it, so you could pull a decent train with it. But I guess they never banked on somebody pulling a 16-car train of 86-foot boxcars, I guess. I don't know. But those are my frustrations with the Cometic couplers, my fixes, and we'll talk about, while we're right here, let's talk about the Thumbtack couplers. So there is one of Lionel's newer run cylinder hoppers. And right out of the box, I got 2 different road numbers of these, by the way, and both of them, right out of the box, I could not keep them coupled to a train. They kept uncoupling and uncoupling, and no matter what I did. So, like I said, there's a couple different things you can do here. So, what are they? Number 1, you can literally throw a tie wrap around them, which you can see right here, which is what I did. So I went to the auto store and I bought 4-inch tie wraps. Some people call them cable ties, zip ties. There's a whole bunch of names for these things. But basically, you can see what they are here. Available at the Walmart in the auto section or AutoZone, whatever auto store you have. And you can literally tie these things up. And so what you gotta do is you gotta actually come across, I'm hoping this camera picks it up, and you can see where I tie wrapped the Thumbtack coupler shut. This is just one option here. Option number 2, if you have kids that have braces, you can use their dental rubber bands from their braces and wrap around here. And that would allow you to still leave the coupler so you could operate it, and the rubber band would keep it, closed. However, the rubber band will eventually either rot and fall off and get up into your locomotive. That's the downside to that. Or break off and get up into your locomotive gears. So that's a chance you take. The downside with tie wrap is that once you tie wrap it, the coupler is no longer usable. You can't open it anymore. So what is the another option, which I have done on the Autorack car, and I'll explain why I did that. So on the Autorack car, what I have done, and you'll see it here, you'll notice the coupler is discolored. That's because I actually super glued it shut. So why did I super glue this shut? Because when you there's not enough clearance between the coupler and the body of the car to put a tie wrap in there. The tie wrap actually gets fetched up and the coupler cannot move back into place, and it gets fetched up and basically it can't return and it derails the car. So I resorted to glue, super gluing them shut in this case, instead of using rubber bands for braces, because I don't want rubber bands breaking and getting up into the gears of my locomotive. So that was a choice that I made on there. So what is the other choice on hand? Well, here we go. So this next tip comes from Harry Henning of Henning's Trains. Shout out to Henning's Trains. Check them out. They have a YouTube channel. Sorry if I don't remember the name of it. It's What's New in the Workshop, something like that. I don't know. I was actually on the show and I should remember the name. But they have a wonderful weekly, they put out a weekly video of new trains that are coming to the shop. They talk about different things in HO and O gauge. So it's a hobby shop that's putting these videos out for the hobbyists. So this next tip on how to fix the Lionel thumbtack coupler comes from Harry Henning. So he recommended taking a pair of needle nose, and I'm not sure if this will show it or not. There's a pin in there, and this camera is not picking up the pin that I'm talking about. There it is. And he recommends taking this tab that I just grabbed a hold of right here and twisting it towards the coupler, which would put the pin deeper inside. There you go. You can actually see the pin now. Right there. Sorry for the black and blue finger, but that's the way it goes as a mechanic. And you got to bend that pin back up into the coupler, and that's supposed to stop it. I'm bending this tab up that way so the pin goes up further inside. Will solve the problem. And I'm not... There we go. I wasn't quite sure if I bent it enough. But I'm a little leery of bending up my tabs. I'm afraid I'll break something, which is why I just resorted to tie wraps. But that is another fix that he recommends, using needle nose pliers and to bend this tab up. There you go, you can see it now. So that pin goes up inside there further. And that's supposed to stop that. Alright, so there's your fixes for the thumbtack couplers. So you got, 4 choices. You can either tie wrap it, you can use dental rubber bands, you can glue them closed, or you could tweak them with a pair of needle nose pliers of fixes. So let's move on to the wonderful milk car coupler. Yay. So there was a lot of bad publicity on YouTube channels about the original or the last release of the Lionel milk cars, because they had these trucks and couplers on them. The trucks were half plastic. The couplers weren't coupled. There was lots of problems. Supposedly Lionel fixed the coupling issues where they won't couple to other cars, but they're still using them. So the latest run of the Lionel 60-foot auto parts cars have the milk car trucks and couplers on them. So let's take a look at that. The problem is that I'm not liking personally is that although I still can't tell if this coupler is, this coupler feels like really cheap die cast to me. So I don't know if it's going to have zinc rot later on or not, but it just doesn't. But you have a truck that's got die cast side frames with plastic in the middle of it. So that the quality, to me, the quality just isn't there for what you're paying for a price. If Lionel wants to use this truck on our semi-scale cars, have at it. In my opinion, these trucks do not belong on a scale car. Give me my original couplers back. I'll even deal with the thumbtack couplers over this. Sorry, that's just my opinion. I'm allowed to have it. So let's talk about the problems with the milk car couplers. And in order to do that, we are going to open up an older release Lionel 60-foot box car. So what we have is we have an older run Lionel 60-foot box car and the latest run Lionel 60-foot box car. Looking at the trucks on the older run, you can see right away there is a lot better quality versus the Lionel 60-foot box cars with the milk car trucks on them. The biggest problem I have with the milk car trucks is that the coupler is stiff. It does not move. You cannot move it. In other words, the coupler, sorry about that, the coupler does not move independent of the truck. So because of this, this car is going to jam up on 042, 036. I can't see this car working well on curves that are, sharp, like 042 or 036. Heck, you might even have problems running this car on 054, especially if you're backing up. And so, if you look at the Lionel older version, what I like about that is that the older version, look at that. The coupler moves independent of the truck. And because of that, this car will negotiate sharper curves, such as 036, 042, where this is solid and does not move. Lionel, if you're watching this video, I want these trucks back. Bring these back. I want these. If you want to charge me an extra $15 for them, go ahead. I'll pay $100 for this car so I can have a better set of trucks. I don't care. But I don't want this. So there's my opinion on my grape to Lionel. So with that being said, yeah, as you can see, there's a big difference in quality between the older and newer. And yeah, so what's the fix for the milk car trucks? Well, unfortunately, you don't have too many choices. You can either try and find the couplers, the older couplers that have the independent swing to them, and swap them out. Good luck doing that. Or, you would have to update to larger curves, which some people don't have the room for. The problem is a standard Lionel truck that's available now will not work because you can see the shank is longer on a 60-foot box car. So if you were to buy the standard Lionel truck that's available, it's going to be too short. So you can't even do that. So unless they offer these long shank couplers, the only other alternative you may have is to go body mounted KD couplers, but then you're still stuck in the same boat as needing larger curves. So there's really not a lot of choices with the milk cart trucks other than replacing them or going larger curves or just plain not buying them at all. And so there's my spiel of my woes and fixes on the Lionel couplers, and I got one more thing to talk about, and then we'll go. So before you write me off as a Lionel hater, I'm absolutely not. Every locomotive on Conahay Rail is Lionel. All of them, 100%. I have quite a bit, or had quite a bit, of Lionel rolling stock. I dwindled it down because I was not happy with the coupler situation on them. So I've been replacing a lot of my Lionel rolling stock with Atlas O. And by far, Atlas O is superior to Lionel and MTH. My opinion, I'm allowed to have it. Atlas O has better detailing. Atlas O has way better trucks and couplers. And the graphics alone, I mean, it's a better product. Bar none. Of course, Atlas O is a little bit more expensive because of that. It's not for everybody. It's not for, and I'm talking about people who want scale cars, because I know people who run semi-scale. They like the stuff like MTH Real King, the Lionel semi-scale, stuff that's a little bit more reasonable. Menards. But, as far as scale cars, this is where all my opinions and what I'm talking about comes from. Because I am high rail, so I'm scale. But no manufacturer can beat Atlas O. And I've seen people beat up Atlas O. Yeah, it takes them forever to come out with something, and the price is high. But you're going to get quality with Atlas O. It takes them a little bit more time, but now they got this. They got the MTH factory, so we should see things more often. And Atlas O, I'm just so glad Atlas O is even reinvesting in the O gauge. They could have walked away and said, "We're done with O gauge, and we'll just stick with HO and N and be done with it." I was afraid that was going to happen, but it's not. They actually reinvested into themselves, into their O gauge lineup. We should be happy about that. So I think we might not see things as often as we did with when it was MTH, or when MTH had these bolts, but I think Atlas O will come out with things more often and than they have been. So that's my spin on that. But getting back to Lionel, I was very unhappy. So if Atlas made it, then I would sell my Lionel version and buy the Atlas O to replace it with. Now, Atlas O doesn't make everything. So what Atlas O doesn't make, I'll have in Lionel or even MTH. But Atlas O will be my go-to as far as rolling stock. I still have a couple of Lionel things pre-ordered. I went ahead and pre-ordered the switcher. I pre-ordered the Lionel CNJ Camelback, which will be the very first steam locomotive on Conahay Rail. And the Lionel 66 Mill Gondola and the Conrail road name. And hopefully it doesn't have them milk car trucks on it. Ugh. Now to drop the bomb on everybody. I saved this part for last. Unfortunately, I decided to sell my CSX train. The whole entire train. Lionel seriously disappointed me. I worked all year long, looked forward all year long to the Lionel CSX law enforcement locomotive. In the catalog, it shows that locomotive with the red and blue ditch light. On their website, it shows that locomotive with the red and blue ditch light. If Lionel did indeed change their game plan and decided to put the white clear lights in it, I didn't see that advertised anywhere at all. I even asked my dealer at the time I picked up that locomotive, and it's not their fault. I'm not blaming my dealer. There's no way. My hobby shop dealer is the best, and they only went by what I went by. And they said, yeah, it should have the red and blue ditch lights, just like you've seen it in the catalog. We have not seen any changes made. I get it home, and it's got the clear ditch lights in it. After looking forward to this locomotive for almost a year on pre-order, after saving for it, I ran it a couple times, shot some videos of it. In the end, I was unhappy. Big time. So when you're unhappy with something, then, you sell it and you move on. And that's what I did. And I think it went to a wonderful home. An ex-conductor of CSX, he worked for CSX for 7 years, came over to my house. And he looked at Conahee Rail and he was blown away. But he ended up buying both my CSX locomotives. The rest of the CSX freight cars I listed either on Facebook groups and eBay. And oddly enough, they all sold rather quickly, except for the Lionel versions. I guess other people know about the Lionel coupler issues, but, eventually they sold because there are fixes for, the Lionel coupler issues, but that's the bomb that I'm dropping. So I no longer had the CSX train or any CSX cars. I still have my Norfolk Southern, Conrail Heritage, and my Penn Central Norfolk Southern Heritage. I'll be keeping those. Other than that, I'm just going to go ahead and stick to the Conrail period. And, I have a Penn Central train, so I'm going to add on to that, because I do want a pre-Conrail era. So as you guys know, I made up a Penn Central train. I love that. Thinking about adding to it a locomotive, but I'm not going to talk about what that's going to be right about now. So I'm still up in the air with that. And even getting into Jersey Central. And the reason why I picked the Jersey Central Camelback is because there's a train station, or ex-train station, has been used since the 50s. There was a train station in my town that was turned into basically a tourist information center in the 60s, 70s. But, prior to that, in the 50s, it was actually used as a passenger station. And the passenger train would loop around that station and then go back the opposite direction. It would pick up people, loop around, and go back. Well, the only way they could make that loop was with a Camelback. That was the only thing that that they had small enough that could make the loop and go back again. So even on the real thing, they were still, restricted of what they could use on that loop to get back around that passenger station. So that's why I picked the Camelback. I got pictures and stuff like that back in the day of that station and the Camelback and a passenger car. So it's kind of cool. All right, so that's enough of that. I'll try and bring you some Conahee Rail some more updates in the future here. But in the meantime, we'll see you next video. Bye.